All right, so I'd like to welcome everybody to our steering group. I think we got a couple more joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
So the purpose of this group is to sort of discuss the big picture of Smart Ships Coalition as a group. Hey Jeff, you're welcome to join us. This is the steering group. Smart Ships Coalition, yeah, and then this is our policy group in here. Very good. So our purpose as a group is to really get together to discuss where do we want to take Smart Ship Coalition as an organization, and what are some strategies to help us both grow the group but also sustain the activities that we've started together. So I'll be moderating this group, and I'm joined by Sarah Atkinson from our research and development organization at Michigan Tech. And she'll be helping to facilitate. So she has the role of bad cop, if you will, to keep us on time and make sure that we are being productive here in this discussion. I think you've heard me introduce myself today, so I won't go into any further detail there. Keep in mind, this is a kickoff meeting for this working group. So our goal is to identify from a very high level what are some of the key activities that Smart Ships Coalition needs to be doing in order to grow and advance this initiative. I'm going to pass around, or I'll have Sarah help pass around a sign-in sheet. And the purpose of this is just to really identify who is, oh, we've got one going, perfect. Who is interested in being involved in this working group. And keep in mind that this is going to be a fluid thing. So we certainly hope that we can attract others from the organization to be a part of this. Because we want this coalition to serve everybody's interests, recognizing we have a lot of very diverse stakeholders. So I'm going to start out by offering a few questions for consideration as we begin to have some discussions here. So again, in my words, the purpose of this working group is to develop a sustainability plan for Smart Ships Coalition, to choose an operating model for this work group and Smart Ships as a whole, and determine how this organization will add value and deliver benefits to the different types of stakeholders that are participating. An anticipated outcome of today's kickoff meeting is that we will brainstorm some goals, objectives, and actions that this work group can take going forward based on where we have common and overlapping interests or challenges and opportunities as an industry. And from what we discussed today, I'll be working with some of our staff here to distill this down into a very high level summary, and we'll be sharing that with all of our coalition members so that they can sort of get a flavor of what we discussed and provide further input on that going forward. So some of the questions you might consider as we begin our discussions are, what are the benefits to your organization of participating in a group like Smart Ships Coalition? And one thing to really keep in mind is that this coalition is one of the only coalitions or groups that I'm aware of that brings together industry, government, and academic partners to a place where everybody as an equal can have a conversation around the topics of smart shipping and technology in our industry spaces. So what are some of the common challenges and opportunities that we can address through collaboration? Is there a value that can be placed on being a member in a group like Smart Ships Coalition, especially if we are accomplishing the goals established and what we might put out as a strategic plan for this group? What forms of governance might work for a group like this, in terms of engaging our members as participants and also leaders in this coalition? Are there needs for positions such as chairs or directors or things of that nature? This is all open for discussion today. And then, as we grow, how do we recruit members to Smart Ships Coalition, and how do we identify who is not in the room that really should be? And I think we heard some of that today in our questions and answers. How do we engage our workforce and the mariners that are not very highly represented in the room today? And I think there's others as well. So thinking broadly about who we might want to involve in these discussions so that we can create a better value for everybody and move this industry forward. Kind of wrapping this up, what is the right frequency and format for these working group meetings? So this is just a very practical concern. I think there's an opportunity for us to continue these meetings virtually at some frequency, but it's also very beneficial getting people here in person today to kind of kick this off and really put some names and faces together. And lastly, you know, what type of financial investments are going to be required and needed to help direct the Smart Ships Coalition towards its goals? And as a group, how can we identify ways to come up with those means in order to even just supporting the administrative aspects of communication, you know, the note taking, the meetings, the venues, and any you know, time and administrative support that goes into this. So all things for discussion. With that being said, we've got a nice small group here, which is a fine place to start. And I think that allows us a couple minutes to all introduce ourselves and maybe just say a couple words about why you're interested in Smart Ships Coalition and how you think this group might be of value. So we could start maybe with Eric.
So my name is Eric Coker. I'm a research engineer here at the GLRC. So my background is in mechanical engineering and mechatronics. So very interested with how autonomy is going to continue to develop, and definitely interested in being part of the story and sort of steering that forward, being involved with marine autonomy and autonomy overall.
Kit Pace. I'm the Coast Guard's supervisor of a new unit, the Great Lakes Center of Expertise. It's just getting off the ground, so this is maybe 2 months in. So I've got a couple of interests. The Center of Expertise has a very specific focus for advancing oil spill response capabilities in freshwater environments. So that said, autonomous ships, planes have a component of that probably going forward. So interested in that respect, and then also just simply standing up a unit is not something that you get training for. So sitting in on the steering committee is interesting to see how you're collaborating. Because a lot of the people in the room are the same people that all look forward to collaborating with. But this is great, and if there's a role for you to play as part of this organization or my predecessor, look forward to doing that.
Thank you.
Hans Van Summer, and I think I explained who I was a little bit ago with the workforce, and that to me would be the one of the big reasons to be part of the steering group, and that is the development of the workforce to support the coalition and the awareness of the coalition. So you know, that I know that's a critical piece for what many of us are thinking about moving forward.
Yeah, Jason Radcliffe. I do waterways management in the 9th district for the Coast Guard. So the whole Great Lakes area. It's not just marine permitting, it's dealing with a lot of novel research craft and operations throughout the Great Lakes that we're having an issue with. Not an issue, but I'd like to be part of the steering group and really get a better handle on all the key players that are developing the newest technology and want to do a test bed around the Great Lakes. And very selfishly, the biggest grind for our folks is getting to developers before they notify us that they want to do a test and come up with a good example is we had about 15-foot long torpedo-like thing that would stay underneath the subsurface looking for algae blooms. And it would lose GPS connection and transmit data only when it surfaced, when it reached the surface. And they didn't know when it would surface or where. So kind of a risk mitigation piece for the Coast Guard there, even down to how it was lit, had a single faint flashing amber light, which doesn't satisfy any navigational lights that we know of. So this is all open new territory, and we need to get involved now so we can open communication. That's why I'm here.
Tim Avens, and I've introduced myself earlier, but obviously Michigan Tech, Great Lakes Research Center, heavily invested in the success of those organizations, and the Great Lakes Research Center is heavily invested in the success of the Smart Ships Coalition. But more than that, just being able to say that we succeeded, it is a passion of mine. So the autonomy, sensing, those research areas, the quality of our lakes and the fresh water are obviously a forefront of what we think about And since this organization is one of the only organizations, as Travis pointed out, through my conversations with other government people and industry people in this area, is that brings together all three of the main entities, the government, the academia, and the industry together. So it's a great opportunity for us to have a big impact in a really important area for the future of one of the most important resources that we have regionally, which is this surface basin of fresh water that is the largest in the world. And so it's very valuable.
So you've already heard from me, and autonomous cars are here and are advancing, and I think being at the forefront of autonomous ships is fantastic. Like we're right at the ground floor now, so we can help make sure obviously it's safe, environmentally sound. That's what we need. So the other thing is to make sure that Canada and the US are prepared, because it's crazy. There's a border, and it's a border, it's an invisible border. It's no such thing as borders. Sure. That's my goal.
Great.
I'm John Schmidt. I introduced myself earlier up on the panel, but I'm with the Great Lakes Owners, Governors, and Premiers, and I think that was actually a good segue into it. We just make sure Canada and the US are working together on this, which we are fully behind. I mean, I think we're interested in this for a number of reasons, and you know, one of the big ones is kind of like what I was talking about earlier, the opportunities to augment existing employment. And we definitely think of like smart shipping and autonomy, and like to focus on the practical component, because I think we can often lose sight of the conversation. You know, people's first thought here is, what do you mean we're gonna have this massive container ship running around the ocean with nobody on it? That's crazy. That's not the near-term implication of any of this technology. Is things like, you know, better route planning, which of course has emissions benefits, you know, collision avoidance, that's a safety thing, autopilot technologies, yeah, positioning technology, stuff like that. And I think that's the piece that we're most interested in and we're most focused on, like those practical, you know, near-term or medium-term applications of this technology, because we're going to have to move through that anyway to get to the big, you know, 7,000-foot container ship rolling around and nobody on it. So I don't think it's you know, it's interesting to have that conversation from a theoretical angle, but it's important to remember there is still kind of a theoretical angle. We got a long ways to go, and a lot of good things to be doing before we get there.
My name is Julie Stabland. I'm the Sustainability Section Manager with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. I oversee the recycling, pollution prevention, and energy teams and the various grant programs that they offer. I'm interested in participating primarily for the electrification that's happening and the charging networks that's going to be needed for that. And also at the side of that, batteries, and how those are managed and how they are planned for. Workforce is always an issue as well, you know, that ties into the whole process. And then, you know, what kind of grant programs should I be looking at and developing to help support this work?
Great. Jamie, do you want to say anything?
My name is Jamie Anderson, Michigan Tech. I'm just looking.
He's the lurker. And then Emily, so basically just our question was kind of, why are you interested in being part of Smart Ships Coalition, and how does your organization fit into that?
Sat on the panel this morning, and we were interested 6-7 years ago, and we wanted to support developing water technologies in Michigan, and that really led to conversations across the Great Lakes region and the water councils and centers and technology development. At that time, we saw a lot of opportunity in the maritime space, and it was, you know, just recent and formation of the Great Lakes Research Center and bringing all this expertise and applying it to the environment out here and connecting it to technology. I think that was just serendipitous and a great way for Michigan to really provide some leadership in this space. You know, from our office's perspective, you know, obviously we've been a funder and a sponsor of the Smart Ships Coalition. I think there's so many connections to state goals and priorities that we're interested in. One primary that's right in the center of our analysis, how can these applications really help us better understand and better manage the Great Lakes? If my colleague Gary Whalen from DNR Fisheries was here, he would say, being able to send autonomous vessels out to do data collection in the open waters of the Great Lakes, where we really don't have any information. And being able to have quiet vessels that allow us to be able to do that data collection and really get a sense of what's going on with the resource. I think there's just so much value to that. And just the way technology integration is happening, I think it's the right time for us to really be in that space. And we're also really interested in making sure that we're leveraging all the water centers across the state and making connections, building collaborative partnerships with diverse interests to make sure that, you know, we're solving the next wave of Great Lakes challenges for the future. And I think the marine technologies and autonomy is great in that sweet spot. We do a lot of strategic integration work that we do in terms of how our Great Lakes priorities fit and connect to other places. And the connection between Great Lakes resource management, sustainability, climate, mobility goals, electrification. I mean, these regular meetings we're having as our Michigan support group of the Mars group. So many things are coming out of that conversation and connection like now looking at, you know, building the first freshwater EV charging corridor along Lake Michigan and connecting land and water corridors. But there's a lot of technical needs that we need to make sure we're thinking about. And I think utilizing capacity solution next is the right place to do that. So I could go on and on. And the workforce development piece obviously is really near and dear to my heart. We have the From Students to Stewards initiative, which is trying to build Great Lakes literacy in the K-12 curricula. But we're really also interested in just fostering water stewardship education across all age groups. So this is an example, like I said earlier, so to building off of that.
Great. Well, thank you. So with that in mind, we all, you know, this group in particular represents a very, the broadest slice of Smart Ships Coalition. And one of the things that, you know, I would like to task you all with and ask for your assistance in is figuring out how do we continue growing this organization, and what are the ways that we can provide some very, you know, some security to the work that we're doing in the terms of having folks that are engaged in leading this organization within your different organizations, a very efficient conduits for communication between us and between the different working groups, but also reaching out to potential new members, you know, other parts of the industry. So to kind of tease out some of these ideas, Sarah and I are going to try to, even though we have a small group, we're going to try to break us into smaller groups to have sort of some one-on-one discussions, or, you know, maybe groups of 3 or 4 with your tables and your neighbors here. And what we would like to do is sort of brainstorm, you know, one would be the highest level goal for the Smart Ships Coalition. What is it we seek to do? And I've attempted to put that into some words of my own for the steering group, and that's to develop a sustainability model and an operating model. But that's my first draft. So please rip that up and let's put that into words that mean something to this group. And then from there, I think I'd like to have everybody's input on what are some very high level objectives, some things that we want Smart Ships Coalition to address, to add value to our different organizations, and then to take that a step further. What are some of the actions that we all need to sort of begin working on together? Because at the end of the day, it's great to come together and meet, and we all head off our own ways, and we have a lot going on. But if we're not taking some actions and assigning some homework as part of this coalition, you know, that there's not a lot of follow-up. So how do we create an organization that brings everybody together, heads our separate ways, but then next time we meet, we have things to report on in terms of advancements in our core pillars of workforce development, technology, and policy. And maybe we're missing a pillar. So those are the 3 we've identified, but are there other things? So at each table, or there will or is a worksheet. And what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of jot down some notes and discuss this with your neighbors of things that come to mind. And let's really spend a half hour or so trying to figure out what are some ways that we can get this group on a track that is sustainable. And part of that includes thinking of ways to fund the administrative parts of this, part of this includes the frequency of meetings and how we go about that. So it's wide open. There's no bad ideas. And, you know, Sarah and I will float around and participate in this conversation with you all. And after that half hour, I'll kind of round up the worksheets and maybe kind of summarize what we've come up with. And we can kind of follow up with what are the next steps then that we need to take. So.
Travis, just before we do that, what's the big name, the overall name? Is it Smart Ships Coalition? Have a sub name? I'm just trying.
Yeah,
Where to start at the top.
That from the very top, we refer to it as Smart Ships Coalition, but if there's a, you know, that's part of this discussion. If there's a more appropriate way to market this group, let's figure that out. You know, smart ships means something different to everyone. So do we need to be also thinking about defining this group in terms of a mission, a vision, a statement that's easy to digest for the public? So it's a great starting point. Yeah,
I think we start at the top and you can filter down.
absolutely. Great.
You wanna break it into groups?
Yeah, why don't we do, what do we got here? Why don't we do 2 groups and then we'll kind of brainstorm amongst those groups and then we'll kind of come back together.
Yeah.
It'd be a good time to present to the group.
Yeah, I think it would. Maybe we can kind of come back together and recap what we discussed and, There, the next round. Would you guys like to start of your discussions?
So we identify who's.
Oh, well, so we said mission, values, mission, vision, goals, and metrics to measure success. These are the high things that items that we want to talk about. We should have an executive committee or a steering committee, whatever we want to call it. Membership, I mean, I think we said either 5 to 7. Probably executive.
Or like executive director,
Yeah.
president, or whatever you want to call yourself, guys.
Well, I'm looking forward to a co-director as well. one day, so.
With the co-director.
Yeah.
Basically to help over him. You said that?
There we go.
What was that?
Delegate the work.
Yes, exactly. We said it should be a tied to a mothership. And mothership city, but whatever it is, there should be I guess, a home organization. Where obviously we can decide.
And administrative organizations or meetings as well.
Yeah. We also brought up, we only have members from tied to the groups, which we do not have now. Members are not tied to the groups. We have the exclusive club of the Great Lakes. Probably not, but I don't. So that way we can get additional membership. Then our slide had a statement or introductory statement that was taken right now.
Yeah,
There's a,
Yes, I think I'm ready. Yeah, I can read it. This is, Travis will probably recognize this as a lot of the same language from the beginning of the Smart Ships Action Plan, but we were thinking like, okay, we need something to jump off of to kind of define the mission. So this is adapted from that. Still because it needs some wordsmithing, but the Smart Ships Coalition was founded in 2018 at the GLRC by representatives of the maritime industry, universities, and other stakeholders. Coalition is working to establish the Great Lakes region as a global center for excellence for developing policy and for researching, developing, and testing smart ship technologies, both on vessels and on shore. Sentence is a little wonky, but in the long term, smart ship technologies can improve the efficiency and competitiveness of the Great Lakes and global maritime system, with the potential to create new high-paying and high-skilled jobs, improve the environmental performance of regional and international maritime transportation, enhance the safety and security of shipping. Building on its unique water resources and traditional strengths in maritime transportation technology, the region can become a global leader in this rapidly growing sector. So you can see the language is still kind of like from when we originally put it together in 2018. We want to make it more active and more like you know, not that it can become a quarterly, but, you know, well on its way to becoming or something like that. But that's kind of how we were thinking through what the goals are. And I think also helped head off the past some of those common criticisms we were talking about earlier, like, oh, well, you don't give a shit about the workers, or, you know, whatever the case may be. Like, the goal of this is to strengthen the workforce and augment it, and, you know, the environmental piece, which is obviously very important. And kind of removing some of the, like, Great Lakes specific pieces that were in the original Smart Ships action plan that we put together, like keeping in mind that this organization has members from who aren't the Great Lakes, but also remembering that you should highlight that you're in the Great Lakes, because I think the bulk of the membership is always going to be from here, you're based here, and like, because it's located on the Great Lakes, that gives it these certain advantages that they wouldn't have if it was in Maine or something.
The team also brought up something that the Great Lakes stimulate in motion survey. Advantages. Well, having a surrogate, you know, previously. I know that it's quiet. Yeah, so that was a good idea. That would be something good. Why would Japan come with us? Obviously, they want to get it for the North American market, but primary reason. But
We also talked about sustainability, membership fees, like charging money, so what do we want to do? I think the consensus was that there needs to be some kind of tiered approach, whether it's value-added sponsorship model, and then also being aware of types of organizations that are part of, like, for example, government organizations most likely will not be able to pay a dues, but they bring the value that industry organizations do not. Back to the government. So we need funding, obviously, but we probably shouldn't charge flat fee for organizations. That's exclusive.
I disagree with the flat fee, though. I think it should be tiered. Whether or not you like attach some other kind of perfunctory benefits to that or whatever, you know, like you're higher up on the page. I think, like, at least in that other group that we mentioned, I was talking about, there are organizations that are more well-heeled than others, and I think it's important to have some kind of variation there so that organizations that do have more money can, like, consider the opportunity of giving more money instead of, okay, this is what everybody has to pay.
Wait, you see not.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you said about class.
Sorry, so Michigan Bumble, you know, this is.
Okay, well, then I agree.
Another way to achieve the competition, for example, the Coast Guard can offer a platform. One of the ships. Before time, and so not only cash. Actions.
And I think,
Time on us.
as you think about this, like, how do you want to get?
That's right. Yeah, we'll probably go 5 minutes. But you want to, I just want like, not interrupt about here. Yeah. And just take a little break. You want to give them a chance?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
No, this is great, and I think you guys have identified some things that we also discussed. We started out with sort of describing what is very top level is the purpose, or what can Smart Ships fully can perform the function of. And one of the things that we all agreed on is that it's creating a safe forum for exchange of information. We could reword that if we need to, but you know, basically bringing together, you know, we use the word lobby today, and creating these lobbies. Well, we understand that government doesn't participate in lobbying, because usually lobbying is towards government, but how do we bring together the interest in the things the government's developing into this space where we can freely exchange that with the industry? So in a sense, they're both two individual lobbies, but we're bringing those groups together here. We discussed, you know, an important component of this function is coming up with a outreach communication plan, identifying who is missing from this group and inviting them, having a communication strategy But also having a sort of a steering committee or, leadership committee that helps to moderate and filter the information that is exchanged. So it's not just a free for all, but it's, it's thoughtfully presented to this group. And part of that would be making this a neutral playing ground. So, we're not functioning as an active advocation group. Folks can do that individually, but we're providing the place to have some of the preliminary discussions that will help the individual advocacy that might happen with industry or others. And then likewise, policy development that's happening with the regulators. We discussed a, pretty important need of developing a leadership council. We put that in many different words, but having a group of people who are members of the coalition that basically assume a role for some period of time that can rotate and change over time. We discussed having a sort of a request for information or a survey out of this group to have folks identify what are their top level priorities for the Smart Ships Coalition. What do they see as the things that this group can function towards? And then also expressing any interest they have in being involved in that leadership of the group for some period of time. In terms of the sustainability, we discussed, the need for funding, but part of that is what are the needs for funding? So people are contributing time and personnel, and part of that time and personnel is going towards the steering and leading of Smart Ships Coalition. That reduces the need for funding to one specific part of this group. So identifying based on the amount of leadership that can be provided in kind. Identifying what the actual plan for this group is in a given year and what are the costs to facilitate that. And then we could maybe more easily come up with the numbers for those tiered membership rates based on, it takes X amount of actual money to support the organization, the events, the meetings, and so forth. We also discussed creating a conduit for business development in the Great Lakes region and looking at ways that we work with larger industry partners to potentially, utilize their growth in our region as an opportunity to help provide some of these funds. I think again, that's kind of maybe the tiered membership has something to do with that. But also what can we do as a region to promote these folks coming here? We heard Sam Perez from Ocean Infinity mention looking to develop a control station on the east or west coast, but they did mention Great Lakes. So how do we play a role in developing this region economically as well? Well, we discussed a lot of other things, but to kind of wrap things up, I think, as next steps, we need to sort of focus on soliciting that feedback from everybody in this group that was here today and really kind of identifying the most engaged folks that want to take that step up to a certain leadership role. So those are the things I guess that I think we'd want to present back to the rest of the group here this afternoon. That said, I'm happy to report that out, or if somebody feels like they're also apt to speaking to this group, I would also be happy to have someone from this group present what we discussed here. So if there are any volunteers, if not, I'll certainly be happy.
You need to get your coach in.
So great. Well, really appreciate this. This is the first step towards figuring out the next steps. So
One question, I feel like we had a conversation about, is there service costs or types of services for using the test bed that GLRC can charge for businesses to do testing here? That could be another source of revenue.
yeah.
So when I think about the membership fees, what the member getting for that? It's the service they're getting, right? Is it the forum to share information and exchange information? Is it something more than that? And then what is the cost of what do we need to cover in order to support the admin of the coalition? Knowing that, like figuring out what is this scale of magnitude, what are different models for covering these costs?
Yeah, that's probably a greater discussion between taking the GLRC out of the Smart Ships Coalition, between the GLRC and the Smart Ships Coalition Leadership Council. Is thinking of how we support those activities with the business model that we have. We were doing.
this.
Well, and if you end up covering time with grant funding or soft funding, project funding, your time is spent. Hope needs to be careful there, it's just right leadership. Wrong administration.
Okay.
Supporting and in operations. So. Just. As a first strategy.
Great. Well, I think the next segment will be workforce development, which will happen right here again, and then sort of a larger technology and applications session in that room. So I imagine there'll be a little bit of mixing in that one here, but there's snacks and pop and water available, so take a go to.